Good morning from Chicago. My name is Michael Kuehl, and I'm the president of Dynamic Ticket Solutions. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Miller, station manager for the North Shore Scenic Railroad. Welcome to Tourist Railroad Connections, more important than ever, episode 8. As the pandemic continues to paralyze the world, and most importantly, everyone here, the tourist railroad industry, more than ever, we need meaningful connections. None of us has the right answers on how to navigate these uncharted waters. No one has ever dreamed of the scenarios we now face. We're all working in the dark, using our gut instincts to make decisions and trying to keep our organizations afloat. Today, Josh and I, along with our panelists, will be furthering the conversation we started 6+ weeks ago. We do not have all the answers. We're not claiming to be experts. We are facilitating a dialogue to share ideas to help establish or reestablish connections. We've made available recordings of past webinars. To access them, simply go to www.dynamicticketsolutions.com and click on the webinars link on the top of the navigation. We would also like to encourage you to participate in our discussion today. On the screen, you will have a dialog box entitled Go to Webinar Control Panel. And with that box should be 2 sections. If you look at the bottom section, you'll notice a gray bar labeled questions, and just below another white box with the words type questions here. Simply type your question and either hit return or the send button, and we'll do our best to work your questions or comments into our conversation. I'd like to just take a minute and talk about the webinar and kind of discuss that Josh and I are doing this basically for free. We're just giving our time to do this. And life is kind of getting in our way now of holding the webinars. So what we'd like to do is have a shift in the way that we're going to be doing them. We're going to be switching from a weekly format to going to a monthly format. And our target is to do it the first Thursday of every month, the time to be determined. We value your feedback, and we want to know what you think about that. And if you could use the chat box to kind of give us your feedback on that. We're thinking about having it, earlier in the day so that it doesn't interrupt with train operations, etc. So we really want to know what you think about that. But we'd also like to know other topics that you'd like to see us cover as well. If you're watching this on the recordings, please just send me an email, and we'll compile a list and then figure out how we want to continue this conversation. So at this point, I'd like to turn everything over to Josh.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Mike. It's really an exciting thought that we have done 8 webinar series so far. This is episode 8 in our series discussing COVID-19 as it relates to the tourist railroad world. And we have some certainly well-known names here with us on our panel today. And it's been really fun, though, to work with you, Mike, and Dynamic Ticket Solutions. My name is Josh Miller, and I'm the station manager at the North Shore Scenic Railroad in Duluth, Minnesota. So Duluth, Minnesota here, we have Chicago, and then we're going to the other 2 time zones here in just a second. It's been really fun to put together this series, and this is specifically for people who manage tourist railroads. This is the audience, and those of you who are on here with us today, I welcome you to the show, and do please give us your feedback, because we discovered as we started this series of dialogue that it's really fun and productive to get information out there for our industry. Many of us kind of exist on our own little islands, some in very small towns operating our tourist railroads, don't often talk to other people doing the exact same thing, but maybe once a year at a convention or something. And our hope is to continue the dialogue, and so we can all kind of learn from each other and develop new ideas. And hey, we can duplicate and copy things too. That's there's nothing wrong with that, especially since we have such far apart distances anyway. So welcome to the show. Be sure to watch some of our previous episodes. Last week we talked to Jim Rinn. Jim Rinn of Trains Magazine was our guest last week, and he had some great things to say. Mike has all of the webinar series that we have done up on dynamicticketsolutions.com's page. So check those out. They are fun to go back. They're hosted on YouTube, and so they play back really good. Anyway, our guest today is Karl Sakas from He's the president of Sakas Company, a consultant marketing company that works with different railroads, and then he's got plenty of experience in the Railroad Museum and railroad operating world. Welcome to the show there, Karl. And then also we will have Tom Hill here. You can see him waiting. He is from the Georgetown Loop Railroad. He's the Vice President of Marketing and Facilities at the Georgetown Loop in Colorado, a well-known operation out there. And they are breaking news. They are up and running. They are operating excursions now. So that is the Georgetown Loop. We're going to talk to Tom Hill here in just a second. A little bit of our agenda today. We are a 1-hour show, so we're going until about 11:30 Central Time here. So we have about 55 minutes or so to get our conversation going, and we're going to talk about we'll talk about Georgetown Loop opening up last weekend. We're going to talk about marketing railroads today, though. That is our main topic, and how we reformulate many of our marketing messages, which generally are pretty consistent. Perhaps, you know, you have your campaign, come ride this train, or whatever it may be. However, this year we have a new challenge on how to reassure customers that we are here, open and safe for you to come to. So that is the challenge that we face in the marketing that will come. Okay, let's get to our guests. I want to talk to Tom Hill first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at your operation, kind of your status and everything else, and then we'll get into the conversation here.
Well, we opened exactly a week ago, so this is our 7th day of operation. We normally start up around the end of the 3rd week of April. Well, that obviously wasn't an option this year.
Sure.
But we're very happy to be open. I think one of our greatest challenges, and it's a marketing challenge as well, is this social distancing. You know, we're a narrow gauge train, and the cars are only 7 feet wide.
Sure.
So that's a whole issue. So the thing we've addressed is that you can come, have your social distancing, be in the open air. We are not running any of our enclosed cars currently. And our capacity on our open cars, which was normally like 34, 38 people, is now we keep it, you know, around 14 or 15. But all of our billboards are up, and they emphasize open air cars. You know, come enjoy the beautiful Rockies out in the gorgeous fresh air.
Sure. How long have you been with the Georgetown Loop Railroad?
Since 2005.
Okay, so 2005.
15
right?
years.
Okay, 15 years. Excellent. And it is just outside of Denver, from what I understand. It's just a geographical.
Yeah, it's 47 miles from downtown Denver,
Okay.
due west on Interstate 70 to the town of Georgetown.
Gotcha. All righty.
In a couple of weeks, we're going to open up our other depot up in Silver Plume, which is 2 or 3 miles up track.
Excellent. All righty. Well, we'll come back to talk a little bit about the Georgetown Loop here in a second, but I want to talk to Karl here. Karl, tell us a little bit about your company, how you work with railroads, and your experience there.
So I've worked with railroads over the years. Started as a volunteer and a board member at the Whippany Railway Museum, where we were one of the very first DTS customers. And where in that case we went from, something like 80% of tickets sold the day of the ride, which, you got a rainy or snowy or otherwise bad day. Suddenly ridership plummets. And so by shifting to DTS, we went from, 80% day of down to 5% day of,
Sure.
Almost all the tickets locked in ahead of time. Also did marketing with the DC NRHS, which operates the Dover Harbor Pullman car, which I volunteer with now. And also for a couple of years ran a business doing marketing and business consulting for tourist railroads and railway museums. Since then, I've shifted to focus on consulting, business consulting, and coaching for marketing agencies, but continue, of course, my railroad-related work through DC NRHS. So my focus, I've been doing marketing and digital marketing since I was in high school, so 20 plus years.
So you're a consultant to the consultants in a lot of ways. Then,
in a sense, yes. Sometimes we'll frame it as, if you've seen the show Mad Men, I would be like Don Draper's business consultant, although maybe not him as a client. He would be a terrible client, wouldn't listen to anything. And I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Gotcha. All right, so you're in North Carolina. We have Tom Hill there, just in Denver, and Mike Kuehl in Chicago, and Josh in Duluth. So there we go. Amongst our viewers here today, and then the people we have here on the webinar series, we have railroads represented all across the country today, and I welcome you all to it. That questions box that Mike had mentioned earlier, it's not just for questions. You can leave us comments there too. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on perhaps the future episodes for this series, but also, your status of your railroad. Are you open? Are you running? What's your start date? Things like that. We kind of like to get a little of that information to help us steer the conversation here as we move forward here in the next hour. Let's go back to Georgetown Loop there. And so you decided to open several weeks ago, I guess, after having been shut down, I'm assuming, from the COVID-19 pandemic. And you are now looking to have your first day, perhaps reassure some tourists, maybe some of your audience out there in Denver, to come up to the mountains and go for a train ride. What is your first step that you took in terms of broadcasting that to the world?
We started up our marketing effort this year in the middle of May with our new billboards. And they emphasized, of course, open air cars. And with that, we try to encourage people to start getting out and start thinking about this. Of course, we couldn't open then, but you got to sort of plant the seeds. So we started that up first. Then with some of our marketing vendors, they furnish free advertising, which is a nice word, to encourage people to start thinking about summer activities, us being one of them. And we did, I guess, maybe 800 to 1,000 radio spots that were donated to the railroad to encourage people, keep us in mind on what's coming up and things to look forward to. I think everybody in the marketing business realizes that anticipation is very, very important.
Would you say some of that advertising that you got based on relationships you had, or there's some gaps in perhaps some of the marketing agencies?
I would say 95% of my marketing revolves around personal relationships. I build business partners as part of our railroad, and these business partners, and it can't be a one-way relationship. I mean, okay, fine, I spend money with these people, but I also encourage them to come up, participate, do things with us. I mean, we've got the head of the sports department on Fox coming up to spend a half a day with us with his family.
Sure.
Well, why? Because we have a good business relationship with Fox.
Well, excellent.
Those things don't happen overnight. You got to work on them, and you do have to work on them. They just don't happen to you. It's important to put forth the effort and make sure people realize you're putting forth the effort, and their participation as a business partner is important to you.
Sure. Let me turn the conversation here to Karl. I think Tom brings up something very interesting there, is based on relationships from his vendors that many of us look at, I just buy billboards for you or whatever. Right. Tom is talking about relationship building as being a key component to their marketing strategy and perhaps getting some feedback there. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that as it relates to, an overall marketing strategy and campaign.
Relationship building is very important. I mean, consider that within professional services, whether this is your marketing agency, your accounting firm, your law firm, others who are supporting your business or your nonprofit, when it comes to client service, there's a lot of discretion that people have about how responsive and how helpful they are. And some of that does come down to budget, but it also comes down to, do people feel appreciated? it is, it's, said a two-way street. But, thinking, when an agency hears from their favorite client, it doesn't have to necessarily be their biggest client, but a client they enjoy working with, they're going to go above and beyond to help a bit more. So love the idea of thinking of it in terms of a partnership rather than solely a vendor relationship, and that includes getting to know each other as people rather than just business connections.
For sure, and lucky we have these really great venues for entertaining people as well.
Absolutely.
Karl, tell me a little bit about your thoughts as far as, many of the railroads right now are either just opening or are shut down and are preparing for an eventual opening either within the next few weeks here. In terms of what is responsible marketing as well, we can't just be like, we're open, come here and go for a ride. It has to have sort of a responsibleness to it.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about the approach to a campaign.
So you've got a number of factors going on, and they'll each be unique to the individual state and individual county, in terms of what the perception is about how things are going. So if you key off that as a starting point, if you're in a situation where there's been, a significant outbreak, you're going to need to be more careful than if you're in a place where, there are very few cases from a COVID perspective. So with that in mind, I know there's the idea around, how much to focus on COVID preparedness and safety precautions versus the actual offering. And, with that in mind, it's like which to focus on it. You need both, because if people are concerned for their safety and safety of them and their family, it doesn't matter what the offering is. The offering could be amazing, but if people don't feel safe, they're not going to show up. So, and with that in mind, different places across all businesses are doing different approaches. For instance, I'm going to my massage therapy place and they're like, must wear mask in North Carolina. Employees will be wearing masks, employees will have temperature checks, though not the customers, which seems odd if you're going to do for one, not the other. But, people don't know what precautions you're taking. For instance, if you, thinking of Tom's point, if you have open air cars, but people don't realize it, they might be thinking about their experience on Amtrak or on a commuter train where, of course, it's all sealed up and they might be concerned. So, from a messaging perspective, I'd recommend over communicating. You have some customers who've been there before, but not under these conditions. So, Jack Welch, in one of his books around building GE, General Electric, said that he would have one corporate focus at a time. And as he would travel around the world talking to hundreds of thousands of employees, he said it took about 3 years before the one message percolated all the way across the company. So if it feels like you've said it 20 times, you might need another 20 times. Keep going, because people aren't paying as much attention to our organizations as we are, and have to over communicate.
Sure. That's interesting. Mike, I'm going to turn to you. We had some questions here from our audience.
Yeah, we also had a couple of quick updates from people posting. Rachel Gray says that the Blue Ridge Scenic Railway plans to resume operations on July 2nd. Scott McGee from Yosemite Mountain Sugar Pine says we're open. Today is our 4th day of operation. Pretty smooth opening with great plan in place. Thank you for these webinars. They've helped craft our opening plan. Thank you, Scott. As far as questions go, we'll start with Alan Wishingran for the Whippany Railroad Museum.
Sure.
What is your general feeling about social donations, soliciting donations we haven't been asking for at this time?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there was the consideration, I guess, of many people who are laid off or shut down and things like that. The question is about, is it appropriate to be asking for donations at this time? Tom, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean,
well, we at the Georgetown Loop Railroad, both online, which about 60% of our ticketing is online, as well as call-ins and walk-ups. We do mention donations for preservation of historic cars and things like that. We average about 28 to 30 cents per person over the year, which comes down to $50,000. We all know in the railroad business, $50,000 doesn't go very far. But what it does allow our guests to do is it invites a feeling of ownership in the facility and that they are invested in it. And then surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, ever so often, you know, you get a call or an email and says, oh, I'd like to donate this 6-figure amount or 5-figure amount, whatever, to the preservation of a caboose or whatever it might be.
Sure.
We don't do any hard solicitations. It's more, would you like to, that type of thing. But it does, the real benefit is the people end up being invested to some small amount, but invested in the railroad. And it has a personal feeling to them. So, you know, and it's worthwhile, you know, I mean, all of us can make use of an extra 50,000 a year to do everything from have to repaint cars to, you know, do the perpetual, oh, we've got to replace all the bronze brake shoes again.
Sure.
So, you know, and sometimes it's small things. We've used it to create areas for children who are too small to go inside our mine. We have mines as part of our venue, but real small children can't go in. So we've built pretend mines with little entrances, with a sand pile in front for the kids to play with dump trucks and things like that. And they can walk to this little building. So that's part of history. So we recreate part of history for small children. So
Well, I like what you guys said with you know, customers thinking of ownership. You know, I bought my ticket, but I also donated that extra $5, and the $5 is what I'm going to remember because, you know, whatever, now I own that engine a little bit or whatever it may be.
that's right.
Like you did that little extra step when it really only took me $5. Karl, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that in terms of, you know, a customer that is already a customer or is a potential customer as you're asking for a donation right now in the midst of this pandemic when some people have limited funds, but others are still doing just fine.
I would not do a hard sell on donations, but I would recommend that you continue soliciting them. For instance, if, you know, people buy a ticket and it's, you know, round up by however many dollars to make a donation, or would you like to add $1 or $5 or 10? Importantly, once you get the donation, what are you doing to stay in touch with them? You know, for instance, thinking when I've, you know, renewed my membership with the Nevada Northern, you know, getting the medallion, you know, in the mail. It's like a nice, you know, a nice surprise. You don't necessarily have to do something, you know, with a little hard thing, but people want to feel appreciated. They want to know that, you know, you're acknowledging them, you're recognizing them. You know, there are also some opportunities if you want to create some sort of a special donor circle. You know, for some organizations, especially in performing arts, they'll have different levels. You know, you have the, you know, vice president's level, the president's level, the, you know, the chair level kind of thing. You know, not everyone cares about that, but some people do. So that might be worth considering. Make sure you're communicating with people, and also think about the future. You know, getting that $1 or $5 or $10 now is important. What are you doing from an estate planning perspective? You might be able to create a, you know, designation for people that have included your railroad or museum in their estate plans. And you know what? It doesn't just involve updating their will. If they have a brokerage account or a retirement account, you know, in electronic form, they can do an update of the beneficiary. And in addition to a person, they can set the beneficiary to an organization. Usually they need your official name and your tax ID number, and then they can designate you. So in the event of their death, the money would automatically go to your organization. It's relatively simple to do once people log into their account, but they need to know that it's an option. And
Sounds like mainly just being, keeping your organization as in their mind as an optional place to.
exactly. And even just knowing that you're a nonprofit. If you're a nonprofit, people may not realize it.
You're absolutely right. As I found that even in just the past 10 years or so, a lot of our organizations that were once, that little railroad in the woods, obviously a nonprofit, have really established themselves in terms of branding and websites and things like that to, in a good way, but sometimes appear a little bit more than a nonprofit. And
Yes.
I think it is important to remind people that no, we really are a nonprofit. We just got really good at making graphics or whatever it may be.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to turn to Mike for a question from the audience.
Okay, Doug Rendell from the Fox River Trolley Museum asks, what is a better marketing tack? Loudly emphasizing that all our COVID-19 precautions, or having the key focus on our offerings?
Interesting. So the question is based on, do you focus on, what you have, your open air cars, your steam, your, dinner, your, people, your views or whatever, or is your focus more on reassuring customers? Let's turn to someone who's already done it. Tom.
Yeah, we offer specials all year long to various groups. Some are in association with our advertising, but things from, as an example, Travel Zoo. Okay, we offer specials with them. We offer specials with our various radio stations and TV stations. And last year, and we're talking about it again this year, the very first train of the day out of our dispatching station, which is in Silver Plume, we always offered a $7 off on a ticket or $10 off on a ticket. This is very important to us because if we fill up that very first train, which would normally be Deadhead going down to our primary station in Devil's Gate, we fill up that first train, that puts you 200 seats ahead for the day.
Sure.
That's a lot of people. Obviously, it's not 200 seats ahead this year, but it is important having a combination of having the people feel safe, which is real important now, and also, a little bit of business as usual. You can still look around. We can have specials for people who maybe can't afford $20, $30 for a ticket because they have 3 children or 4 children. We can help them out with a special. And we usually try and do our specials as, adult child combinations for the price of just an adult ticket. So basically you have a child free. Mm-hmm. So these things are important because a lot of people have been laid off for 3 months. And you can think all you want to, well, don't worry, the government sent them, an extra $600 here and they got unemployment there. That doesn't go very far for many people, especially those with families.
Sure.
So you got to keep thinking about, you got to take yourself out of your chair in marketing and put your chair over there with them at their table when they're making decisions on what they're going to do for the weekend. And in some cases, money does matter. The other cases, a feeling of comfort and safety is important. So you can't just target one area. You got to sort of spread it all around. And that's what we try and do. And we change it pretty consistently every 6 weeks or so. We put new offers out or change the environment. We have all sorts of special events all year long, and we advertise those events. So you don't just come to our railroad one time.
Specific to the question, though, you're continuing to advertise those special events.
Right, you have to.
Turning to Karl, getting the head of your potential customer is what Tom is touching on here. Is the potential customer right now who's preparing to take the kids out for the weekend vacation on tourist railroads, do they want to hear what all the great things that you have to offer, or do they want to hear all the great things you're doing to keep it safe and social distance and all the things that we've heard on the news?
Both. And, again, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to come, no matter how amazing the experience is. It is worth considering that people really want a return to normalcy. I don't know if that'll ever quite happen in the future. I mean, thinking about, almost a couple decades later, we're still taking off our shoes when we travel,
Sure.
or go through the airport. But, thinking about the appeal of normalcy, if you can convey, you will be safe as is possible under the circumstances. We can't promise that it's, just going out of your house is dangerous. But, we've taken these precautions to help. There's still a risk, but we take these precautions. If you feel comfortable joining us, here's the amazing experience you can enjoy with you and your family. And, after being cooped up in the house for months, come on out and have a good time.
For sure, a little bit of kind of reassurance, but also, still traditional marketing messages, right?
Yes. So acknowledging and then focusing on the experience.
For sure. I'm going to ask you kind of a challenging question here for the Georgetown Loop that is now open and operating. And a reminder that our audience here is management of railroad operations. This isn't necessarily, public and passengers and things. In preparations to reopen, was there any point where you thought, no, we don't need to do that. That's going to take too many resources for us to focus on that, whatever that may be. Let's just say signage, is a huge expense to have a bunch of signs made, or, masks and gloves and things like that. All of those things have expenses. Is there any component of your plannings for reopening where you acknowledge that you didn't need to focus on it as much as you may have, somebody may have suggested in the meeting where you were discussing it?
I think for our railroad, obviously the social distancing issue and the layout, we've changed how we ticket people. We want to make them feel safe. We request people to wear masks. All of our staff wears masks and gloves. If you choose not to wear a mask, you can still ride a railroad. If you've forgotten it, we'll also make sure you have a mask. So these are extra expenses. Additional extra expenses is we've put 1 to 2 extra people out on the grounds and boarding the train to help the people in getting to their seats, to maintain their social distance. And that's you have to do that with very tender guidance. How's that?
Sure.
You don't want to be, oh, by the way, these are the rules and you got to follow them, blah, 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 blah. That's not how you get repeat customers. And believe me, anybody in this business, if you think you can do without repeat customers, it's not going to happen. You got to have repeat customers.
Everybody's got a voice too.
They do. And so we try and make sure people feel comfortable. We do have one regulation on our trains, and that is we also have mines, underground mines, as part of our train operation. And if you choose to go inside the mine, it is a state requirement that you do wear a mask underground, as well as a hard hat. That's a federal requirement. But outside of that, we try and make people feel comfortable. Our train doesn't go very fast, 4 miles an hour. So.
I'm going to hammer back to this question just a little bit for you, Tom, though, because the question I'm looking for is last week was it last week or the week before, from Leadville, Colorado, not too far away. She was very ambitious and talked about their whole scope of their plans for social distancing and gaps in the lines at ticketing and all of their cleanliness. And then she said, but a lot of people showed up and they don't care and they weren't worried about it, and they stood next to each other, and they found that there were some places in the operation where they were really concerned about this, when in the end you have to rely on people to also follow those guidelines. Have you found any of those cases where we didn't have to worry about the spacing on the open air car, for example, or inside our station, it just kind of worked out that the flow people, walked through here, and we spent a lot of time focused on that. What kind of things like that have you maybe experienced in the past week?
Well, a couple things we've done is you don't go inside the station. Bingo. All of our ticketing is outside. Our retail sales is set up outside. So those are big changes. We've extended the boarding area, maybe 150 feet more than the standard area that we line people up to board. And because of that, it's easier for people to do basically what's right. We all know what the guidance is. Make it easy. Don't hit people in the head or anything. Make it easy for them to comply.
I think that's a thing. I've been to many scenic railroads where you have this big, huge platform, but we're all going to board through one door and all going to line up in the same spot. Why? Right?
Well, it took a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work and analysis. And yesterday, we spent 5 hours doing the same thing for our other depot up in Silver Plume, because it does take a lot of organization, a lot of thought, how you're going to coordinate the people and how you're going to give them the opportunity, if you want to call it, to do self-discipline to maintain spaces between their groups. But it's not automatic. You've got to do your work ahead of time. And then, there's always somebody in our staff that's not too many feet away that comes by and, okay, you can move forward some now, or you may want to hold back a little bit. The people in front of you got a little bit close to you. In other words, don't ever put it on their back. Okay.
Right.
So
Sure.
These are psychological type things that you can do that make for happier customers.
Karl, thoughts on that?
To build on that, a lot of challenges are systems problems. I'd recommend reading the book Meltdown: Why Our Systems Fail and What We Can Do About It by Clearfield and Tilsic, a book called Meltdown. And one of the things they look at when there are systems failures, when things fall apart, whether it's a nuclear meltdown or something less dramatic, complex systems tend to be more likely to break versus simple systems. The more moving parts you have, the more likely things are to fall apart. And the other factor is what they describe as tight coupling versus loose coupling. And the idea there is that if things are tightly coupled, it's, steps are immediately after each other, versus, loose coupling, there's more of a buffer, right? So
Sure.
For instance, maybe it's down to reminding people about arriving extra early rather than just early. If people aren't rushing at the last minute because they didn't allow enough time, they're going to have a better experience and everyone's going to be safer.
Absolutely. I think that many scenic railroads are great places to arrive early too. I'm always the one to want to get there an hour early because I want to see it all steaming up and the preparation there.
And tied to that, of course, if people are arriving early, what do you have for them to do? That means, whether it's opening the snack bar sooner or what have you, if suddenly more people are going to be there earlier than usual, what else do you need to change?
Sure, that's a good question. I want to turn to Mike here for some online questions.
Okay. I do have one question from Peter Lips from the Berkshire Scenic Railway. What different media choices have been made based on the changes of the operating system dates? So is that something that should be considered, I guess, is what media choices should you make now that all of these dates are shifting around?
That's interesting. So just for, we're talking about different mediums, I think is what the question is based on. Karl, thoughts on that? I mean, many of us do a lot of traditional stuff, rack cards and brochures and billboards.
It's worth considering if you aren't doing a lot of digital marketing now, whether it's time to start or whether it's time to expand that. You can ultimately change things a lot faster versus, needing to send someone out to update the billboard. It may also be a case where if you do have print materials or other traditional materials, maybe the point is to send people to your website or somewhere else electronically so that people can get the latest information. So do that combo of traditional pointing toward digital, where you can keep your digital side more updated. Something to consider.
They work hand in hand there. Another question from the audience here, Mike?
Randy Gustafson from Stone Consulting made it, I guess, a question. Issues with volunteers, employees complying with distancing, masks, and cleaning policies. Volunteers refusing either due to new requirements or health concerns.
For sure. Yeah, and I think we had a similar question too from, this is going to be for Tom. Was it? We had two similar ones. Tom
Marcus
had a similar one. Tom Hill. Some of the policies that you put in place, now we have, volunteers, sometimes volunteer crew members, but then also staff. Some of those are one and the same. Do you have any pushback from people who are like, no, I don't want to have to wear these gloves or masks or do that one thing?
Well, I guess I should be very thankful as we don't have any pushback from our staff or our volunteers. Now, our volunteers only work at our mine operation. And of course, that's all outdoors except the underground portion. And the underground portion is very stringent on what you can and can't do.
Sure.
But my overall feeling, both from our guests, our staff, and our volunteers, people want to return to normal. I think we've all seen that. And I think they also realize that normal may not be what we're used to for the last X number of years, decades, and or centuries. I hope we get back to whatever the new normal is sooner than later. I belong to that group that's supposed to lock themselves up in their home and never venture out. That's not reality for me. So I have to take the extra steps to make sure I try and be as safe as possible. And many of the people, and I don't know about other railroads, we have many people that are over 65 that work for us, volunteer for us. And we have seen some reluctance among those people in that age group to come back. So, we try and emphasize to them and not pressure them. We want them back. They are a true asset. Sometimes they have a great deal of history. They may have worked at not just our railroad, but other railroads for decades and decades and decades. Well, how much is that worth? It's worth a lot. But if they feel endangered, they're going to be reluctant to come back. So we got to make sure we keep it as safe as possible for them and make sure that we're there for them and with open arms and welcoming them back as soon as they can feel comfortable coming back to one of the positions we have available.
Absolutely. And, to echo that a little bit, I mean, we're talking about the core of our audience is generally that, 60-year-old plus age group, which, correct me if I'm wrong here, Karl, in general, we don't necessarily focus our marketing on because we know that they're there and they have been our reliable customers already. And thus, that is why they're generally not attended to in our marketing efforts. However, that maybe is something new. We do have to reach back out to that core demographic of, the 60 plus age group that, tend to be the regulars at a railroad museum. Tom?
And that fits into the over communication piece, rather than assuming people know what you're doing and what's changed. Tell people and then tell them again.
Sure. Yeah. We sometimes make the mistake, right, of saying it, one post. Well, I did that already, but he didn't. Tom, I've been in a few meetings where it was, how are we going to enforce that? How are we going to enforce it so only one person can walk through here and walk down that, platform there? How are we going to enforce that? can you tell me a little bit about what the Georgetown Loop has done in terms of enforcing policies such as one-way walking or, you know, social distancing or whatever, and then any pushback that you've gotten from customers who are like, I don't need to worry.
We have a lot of signage, a great deal of signage, and the same message frequently. If you have it here, maybe 30 feet further on, you have the same message again. So signage is very important. We do a lot of standard and chain operations to separate routes, you know, with signs saying exit here, entrance here, you know, make sure you try and maintain a distance, because it gets to a point where people almost close their eyes and shake their head when they hear the word social distance.
Right.
You know, try and maintain distance between you and the people in front of you. That's a really soft message. They can put the word social in there. You don't have to do that all the time.
Sure.
These people that come to our railroad, and by the way, the demographic has changed radically. And if you're not open yet, you'll probably realize this. We have a large number of people in the plus 65 crowd that always come and ride our railroad. Well, guess what group is not riding right now? Plus 65. Guess which groups are riding? 20 to 30-year-olds and 30 to 40-year-olds. Now, guess where they're all coming from? Facebook. Bingo.
Sure.
Because those people, they're used to using social media to get everything in their world. And that's going to include us. So we've got like 65, 70% of our riders right now are getting to our website via social media. Most of those are Facebook. Now, part of that is you have to invest a great deal in time and money to maintain the liveliness. How's that? There's a good word. Liveliness of your Facebook and actually all your social media areas, including our websites. They are constantly updated. New pictures, new activities, maybe the old activity with a new picture. Always make it feel fresh. Same thing, we communicate with our, if you want to call them regular guests, we have an email list approaching 100,000 people that we usually keep within the last 3 to 4 years. And we email those people. We'll send them specials sometimes. So, you know, signage is a big part of it, and the physical routing of your guests on how they get on the train, how they get off the train, and don't forget how your staff gets on and off the train.
Sure.
That's important also. It's in this time where people like to, at least them and their children or whatever, they want to stay with their own little group. It's not any fun if you've got the conductor or somebody pushing their way past you. You know, oh. So, you know, make sure that when you do your planning on activities and access to activities, that you do your part as the manager of the railroad to help people feel safe, feel comfortable. Because if they're not safe and they're not comfortable, you know, let's go back over there for the 4th of July. They say, boy, it was sort of, you know, I wasn't comfortable there. You know, when they think about coming for the 4th of July, oh, that was so much fun, we got to go. So
Sure.
Those are the things that we're concentrating on. And again, those are things that you, as a railroad manager, has to think about all the time.
For sure. Karl, you have a perspective on what Tom is talking about here. Any kind of response about you know, the things he's talking about is all of this really does have to do with what your overall perception is, because you know, what he's talking about is in that return, that consideration moment of should we go back there. That is also a marketing piece. So their experience that they had and that split-second memory that could distort it because the conductor pushed me out of the way or whatever it may be. How does that relate to the overall marketing agenda? Any kind of response to what he's talking about?
It all makes sense. I mean, considering that, we often think of marketing as advertising or messaging or promotion to get people to take actions, which that is part of it, but it also ties into the customer experience. You could have the best marketing in the world and the experience is bad. And as Tom said, people are like, should we really come back? Here's a simple yet powerful way to think about it. It's a concept called warmth and competence. Comes from a book called The Human Brand by Chris Malone and Susan Fisk. And the idea there is that as people interact with companies and with other people, they're thinking about the interaction in two areas. One is warmth, the other is competence. Competence is sort of easy to think about. That's, did you get the job done? Did the train leave on time? Did it get back on time? Did people get what they were promised in the experience? That's competence. Warmth, and ideally you're going to be high competence and high warmth. Warmth is about making people feel special. Did you make them feel special, that it wasn't just about the money they were paying you? And that works with your team as well, with your staff and your volunteers. It's not just, did you fulfill what you said you do, did you make them feel special? So that does require extra work. It might be checking in with a volunteer or a staff member who may have been away for a bit, or that kind of thing. Another angle on the warmth side, really it's about putting yourself into your customer's shoes, but it's hard to do that, right? If you've been doing something over and over again, whether it's for months or for years or for decades, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's never been there before. For instance, through an association, we would have a monthly luncheon at a country club in Raleigh. And it had a certain perception of being, hoity-toity and this and that. The reality was it was the cheapest place to have a sit-down lunch at our budget, and it was centrally located. It just happened to be the country club, ballroom. And what we found was that people would arrive for events and they'd look into the room with, 150 people, and if it was their first time there, they had no idea what to do, no idea where to go. No one was greeting them. No one was helping them, for instance, say, go grab a seat and then go to the buffet, because you want to make sure you grab a good seat. And we added that based on feedback, based on interviews with new members, new guests. The simple thing to do is, as people are heading out to the parking lot, would be interview them. Not everyone's going to want to talk, right? No one loves seeing that someone is standing there with a clipboard and wants their attention, but some people will talk. And you know what? Some people who had an unhappy experience, they will be glad to talk. And it's a lot better to, talk to them then, rather than they go home and post, an update on TripAdvisor or Yelp or Google.
Or even beyond that, just forget to give any feedback whatsoever. Right. Well expressed. I think I supplemented the old cards now with, you get this email survey afterward. But now it's a couple of days that passed. So, I like the idea of that immediate feedback. We have a little over 5 minutes left here. I want to remind everybody watching, thanks so much for being here with us today. If you have any additional questions here for Tom Hill of the Georgetown Loop Railroad, who is operating right now, feel free to put that in the questions box here. We also have Karl Sakas from Sakas Company, and then lots of good marketing information going on here, marketing discussion. I want to ask you guys both, being relevant here, again, Leadville said it best, I think, when she said that this is our business. We have to focus on making our business work, and whether beyond politics, beyond, we got to do it responsibly, but we have to figure out how to make our businesses work. In terms of how to relay that to our audiences or potential customers, how do we, stay relevant right now in a time when people are thinking about a lot of other things? I think I'm going to turn to Tom first here for this, staying relevant in their mind.
That's one of the more difficult things.
Absolutely. It's a big question.
Yeah. In a way, at least what we've seen in these short week that we've been open, I think the relevance is almost taking care of itself. People have been confined for an extended period of time, and especially with the good weather, at least some of us have good weather. I know back east they've had some bad weather.
Sure.
But with the good weather and everything, you want to go out and you want to feel something that's comfortable, that you know that it's going to make you feel good. And so that's relevant to you. Well, over the years and decades, we've become relevant to generations. And that relevancy, they seem to want to grasp it with open arms because it's a relevant part of their summer. Okay, it's part of fond remembrance in many cases. And by the way, those fond remembrances, you know, the key thing for that is your staff. You know, that customer service has to be number one. Well, that's not true. Safety is going to be number one, but the customer service and making the people feel welcome, that they do matter, you know, their happiness matters. We normally have 3 staff on our train that circulate among the 8 or 9 cars we run, and they personally interact with each of the guests when they can, or at least each of the groups. So that little extra piece of attention makes the whole situation more relevant to them. But that's a lot of that's opinion, folks.
For sure. No, those are great words. Karl, from you know, the 20,000 foot perspective.
You know, I was at a dinner several years ago with a volunteer group. It was a celebration dinner after our sponsorship team had succeeded in hitting some big goals. And one of our group members was, you know, he's a bit of a curmudgeon, and he was talking about, you know, what he wanted to get for dessert. And people were saying, well, the chocolate chess pie, that's their specialty here. And he's like, well, I just want an ice cream sundae. Well, one of the staff members stopped by, asked how we were doing, and we told her about, you know, about his dilemma. And she chatted a bit. Turned out she was the dining room manager. And, you know, we talked a bit more, and then she excused herself. 10 minutes later, she came back with a slice of pie inside an ice cream sundae. Because she was paying attention, and also she had the flexibility to walk around and take care of people the way that the servers didn't, because they were busy fulfilling the orders that, you know, we'd already shared. And I did some follow-up research. I was like, was she one of the owners of the business? Like, that was really attentive. And she was not. She'd worked there for a number of years, but it turned out that this was actually part of her mindset. That she thinks of herself as the host of an enormous dinner party, and if someone is having a bad experience, she will do whatever she can to make things better. And you know what? I didn't see the receipt, but I bet we got charged for 2 desserts, so it was profitable as well.
Sure.
You know, when it comes to getting help, especially on the digital side, you know, I do not provide digital marketing services myself. One of my clients does digital marketing for adventure travel, so not necessarily tourist railroads. liquidspark.com. They do have tips that may be relevant to your railroad or museum at liquidspark.com. And if you're trying to figure out pay-per-click ads, I've worked with a freelancer who does PPC named Lauren in Indiana. Her website is contentissocial.com. You know, I'm not getting paid anything for saying that, but it helps to have someone trustworthy who can help, especially the first time you do anything.
Karl, perhaps you could provide some of those really helpful links and stuff back through Mike. We send out a message afterwards.
Absolutely.
I do think that a lot of us who have done the marketing for our railroads have been doing kind of the same thing for years and years and years, and it's kind of worked. So why mess with it? But it's, you know, a good time to start doing things fresh, and or exploring new options. I do have to wrap up though. We're running out of time here. I really appreciate you both for being here with us today and taking the time to have this discussion. Tourist Railroads and Railroad Connections, Tom Hill from the Georgetown Loop, thank you so much for your time and best wishes to you in operating the railroad. Karl, Sakas, thanks so much for your insight on many and of course your resources that you can provide. I'm Josh Miller here from the Duluth, Minnesota Lake Superior Railroad Museum and North Shore Scenic Railroad. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Karl. Again, Josh, thank you so much for everything that you do here. We hope that you found this helpful and would like to encourage your feedback. We're going to ask if you do have feedback, until you get the invitation for our next webinar, just feel free to send me an email directly on any thoughts or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover. Our next webinar will be the first Thursday in July. The time to be determined, but again, we'll get that out in our invitation. Besides continuing the conversation today, we'll be getting an invitation out shortly, so please watch your email. Feel free to share the invitation with people that you think might be able to benefit from our conversation. Let's all stay safe and stay connected. Thank you.